Hello dear students, welcome back to EduHunt video lecture series. In the previous session, we have discussed about some of the general characters of pteridophytes. Pteridophytes అనగానే మనకి first land plants అని, vascular cryptogams అని, true leaves, roots, shoot ఉన్న first plants అని గుర్తు రావాలి. అలాగే లైఫ్ సైకిల్లో డామినెంట్ ఫేజ్ ఆఫ్ ద లైఫ్ సైకిల్ స్పోరోఫైట్ అని కూడా గుర్తు రావాలి. ఇవన్నీ కూడా ఇంపార్టెంట్ పాయింట్స్ అని మనం ప్రీవియస్ సెషన్లో డిస్కస్ చేసుకున్నాం. రిమైనింగ్ జనరల్ క్యారెక్టర్స్ని ఇప్పుడు ఈ సెషన్లో మనం డిస్కస్ చేసుకుందాం. యాజ్ వీ హ్యావ్ మెన్షన్ దట్ ఇట్ హ్యాస్ స్టీల్ which is surrounded by pericycle, and in the center of the steel there is pith, and origin of that steel and its evolution is seen for the first time in pteridophytes. And stem is usually underground, and it is underground rhizome type of stem. Rhizome means an underground stem which grows in the soil in a horizontal manner and spreads in all directions, or sometimes the stem is erect. Trunk as seen in tree ferns. Some of the tree ferns have erect and aerial stem, not the underground, it is erect. Leaves are large, that is megaphyllous leaves or macrophyllous leaves, and variously shaped. These leaves are variously shaped, and the sporophytes bear sporangia. They bear sporangia, and that are subtended by the leaf-like appendages called sporophylls. Sporophylls are the leaf-like structures which bear sporangia. Sporangia bearing leaves are called sporophylls. Sporangia producing phylls, leaves. Large phylls, leaves. Large leaves are called megaphylls. Small leaves are called microphylls. In the same way, spore producing or sporangia bearing leaves are called sporophylls. And in some cases, these sporophylls may be distinct, compact structures called strobili or cone-like structures. Sometimes the sporophylls, they aggregate into cone-like structures or the strobilus. Example, equisetum. I'll show you equisetum picture. This is equisetum. This is equisetum cone or strobilus. The sporophytes bear specially structured leaves which bear sporangia are called sporophylls, and sometimes the sporophylls aggregate into a cone-like structure called the strobilus. It is seen in Selaginella and equisetum. And the sporangia, they produce spores by meiosis. The spores are the meiotic products of the spore mother cells. The sporangia, they have spore mother cells which are diploid in nature. They undergo meiotic division, which is a reduction division. That is why they produce the number of chromosomes which are halved. For example, if the mother plant has 20 chromosomes, the sporophylls have 20 chromosomes, sporangia have 20 chromosomes, and the spore mother cells also have 20 chromosomes. But spore mother cells, after undergoing meiotic division, they produce spores, and the spores are haploid in nature. That is, they have only half of the number of chromosomes, that is 10 chromosomes. I am just giving an example. So by meiosis, the spore mother cells, they produce the spores which are haploid in nature, and sporangia are born on the abaxial side of the fertile leaves called sporophylls. Sporophylls ki abaxial side, that is, this is the upper surface, abaxial is the basal or the lower surface on which the sporangia develop. So this is the abaxial surface, basal surface of the leaves are provided with these sporangia, spore producing structures. These sporangia are born either singly or in clusters called the sori. Single ni sorus antamu, clusters ni sori antam. So a sporangia, sometimes they grouped into a sorus. So అవి సోరస్ లాగా ఒక గ్రూప్ ఆఫ్ స్పోరాంజియా అయినా ఫామ్ అవ్వచ్చు, ఆర్ అదర్వైజ్ దే మే produce singly, solitarily, and the spores germinate to give rise to the inconspicuous small multicellular free living mostly photosynthetic thalloid gametophyte. మనం ఎప్పుడు కూడా ఆల్టర్నేషన్ ఆఫ్ జనరేషన్లో చెప్పుకునేటప్పుడు గ్యామెటోఫైట్ నుంచి స్పోరోఫైట్, స్పోరోఫైట్ నుంచి గ్యామెటోఫైట్ అన్నాం. ఇక్కడ స్పోరోఫైట్ ప్లాంట్ sporophyte అయితే ఆ sporophyte after the spores undergoing after the spore mother cells undergoing meiosis, the spores are the resulted, and the resultant spores are haploid in nature. They germinate to produce a thalloid gametophytes which are haploid. Gametophyte ఎప్పుడు గుర్తుపెట్టుకోండి, haploid. Gametophytes are haploid. Sporophytes are diploid. స్పోరోఫైట్ నుంచి గ్యామెటోఫైట్, గ్యామెటోఫైట్ నుంచి స్పోరోఫైట్, అలా లైఫ్ సైకిల్లో ఒకదాని తర్వాత ఒకటి వస్తూనే ఉంటాయి. దీన్నే మనం ఆల్టర్నేషన్ ఆఫ్ జనరేషన్ అంటాము. అయితే మనం బ్రయోఫైటాలో చెప్పినప్పుడు లైఫ్ సైకిల్ ఈజ్ haplodiplontic అన్నాము, బికాజ్ haplontic phase, that is haploid phase, gametophytic phase is dominant over the sporophytic phase which is a diploid one. ఇక్కడ diploid sporophytic phase is dominant over gametophytic phase which is haploid. సో ఇక్కడ మనం లైఫ్ సైకిల్ ఏమని చెప్పచ్చు, డిప్లో హ్యాప్లాంటిక్. అక్కడ హ్యాప్లోడిప్లాంటిక్ అయితే ఇక్కడ డిప్లో హ్యాప్లాంటిక్ టైప్ ఆఫ్ లైఫ్ సైకిల్, అండ్ ఇట్ ఈస్ క్వైట్ కామన్ ద ఆల్టర్నేషన్ ఆఫ్ జనరేషన్. ఇక్కడ గ్యామెటోఫైట్ ఏమంటామంటే ప్రోథాలస్ అంటాం, బికాస్ థాలస్ అనగానే మనకి ఏం తెలుసు, which is undifferentiated plant body. Thallus is an undifferentiated plant body where there are no leaf, stem and roots. ఇక్కడ కూడా just ఒక prothallus which spreads over the substratum that is produced by the spores after germination. This is one of the examples of pteridophytes. Selaginella చూడండి, with tiny leaves, microphylls తో పాటు మనం చూస్తున్నాము. These are rhizophores which help in attachment to the substratum, which it is equisetum, where this is the underground stem called rhizome. From the rhizome the erect branches appear, and the branches bear leaf-like structures or sometimes leaves. At the apex, the sporophylls, they aggregate into cone-like structure called the strobilus, which is present at its tip. The gametophytes, just now we have seen that the prothallus is the gametophyte which is the resultant of the germination of the spore. Now the gametophytes, they require cool, damp, shady, moist places for their proper growth and development. Because of this specific restricted requirement and the need of water for fertilization, the spread of the living pteridophytes is limited. ఎందుకు లిమిటెడ్ అంటే దే రిక్వైర్ వాటర్ ఫర్ ఫర్టిలైజేషన్, అంటే స్ప్రెడ్ అవ్వాలంటే దే రిక్వైర్ వాటర్ అండ్ రిస్ట్రిక్టెడ్ టు నారో జియోగ్రాఫికల్ రీజియన్స్. అంటే స్ప్రెడ్ అవి వాటర్లోనే స్ప్రెడ్ అవుతాయి కాబట్టి ఇఫ్ దే స్ప్రెడ్ త్రూ ఎయిర్ దెన్ దే మే రీచ్ ఎనీ రీజియన్స్. జాగ్రఫికల్గా ఎక్కడైనా అవి డెవలప్ అవ్వచ్చు, బట్ దే రిక్వైర్ సమ్ మాయిస్ట్ ఏరియాస్. అంటే స్పోర్స్ డిస్పర్స్ ఎక్కడ పడితే అక్కడ పడితే అవి మొలకెత్తవు. జస్ట్ దే మస్ట్ రీచ్ ద సూటబుల్ ఫేవరబుల్ సబ్స్ట్రేటమ్ ఫేవరబుల్ ఎప్పుడని చెప్తామంటే ఇఫ్ దెర్ ఈస్ డ్యాంప్ సాయిల్ దెన్ ఓన్లీ దే కెన్ జర్మినేట్. సో ద గ్రోత్ ఈజ్ రెస్ట్రిక్టెడ్ అండ్ ద డిస్ట్రిబ్యూషన్ ఈజ్ restricted on the globe because they are seen only in limited areas because of their requirement of water for fertilization. So fertilization jaragapothe sporophytes ravu. The gametophytes bear male and female sex organs, we know that, and the male sex organs are called the antheridia and the female sex organs are archegonia. And the antheridia, they produce motile sperms, male gametes. They are biflagellated in Selaginella and multiflagellated in ferns. Male gametes ki 2 flagella untai, for example Selaginella. In other ferns the male gametes are multiflagellated because they require they need to reach the female gamete. If they need to reach the female gamete, they must have some sort of appendages for swimming in water. Just for the sake of swimming, just for the sake of movement, they produce these flagella, whether they are 2 or many in number. In Selaginella we see only 2 biflagellated male motile gametes, and in other ferns they produce several flagella on the male gamete. Archegonia, which is a female sex organ, and it is sessile and flask shaped. Sessile ante there is no stalk ani ardham. They are slightly embedded in the tissue and with a neck and swollen venter. Neck is narrow and venter is broad and swollen. Neck is made up of 4 vertical rows of cells and each row with 2 to 6 cells, and venter is embedded in the tissue, that is gametophytic tissue, and has no wall of its own, and it is encloses a non-motile ventral canal cell and an egg cell or the oospore. సో మనం బ్రయోఫైటాలో చూసినట్టే ఇక్కడ కూడా టెరిడోఫైటాలో కూడా ఆర్కిగోనియా ఆర్ ద ఫీమేల్ సెక్స్ ఆర్గన్స్, and these female sex organs they have a small neck and a broad venter. అయితే వెంటర్ స్పెసిఫిక్గా బయటికి ప్రొజెక్ట్ అయ్యి ఉండదు, యాజ్ వీ హ్యావ్ సీన్ ఇన్ బ్రయోఫైటాలో అయితే స్టాక్స్ ఉంటాయి. ప్రతి ఆర్కిగోనియంకి కూడా స్టాక్ ఉండి అది బయటికి ప్రొజెక్ట్ అయి ఉంటుంది. బట్ ఇన్ కేస్ ఆఫ్ దిస్ in pteridophytes the venter is hidden in the, అంటే no wall is there exactly, the demarcating wall is lacking here, and archegonia or the venter especially is embedded in the tissue, gametophytic tissue, and the sexual reproduction is oogamous type. మరి అంతే కదా, male gametes and female gametes are there. Male gametes swim and reach the female gamete. In that way the fertilization occurs and water is required for the fertilization, and to transfer the anthrozoid, the male gametes, water is required. Fusion of male and female gametes, that is called fertilization, is happens. Fertilization occurs in the archegonium and it forms the zygote and it undergoes the division, produces sporophyte. Zygote thereafter produces a cellular well differentiated sporophyte, which is dominant phase of the life cycle in pteridophytes. Life cycle is diplohaplontic. Diplohaplontic ante diplontic phase is dominant over haplontic phase. And sporophyte is dominant over gametophyte, and alternation of generations also occur, which are heteromorphic in type. What is heteromorphic and what is homomorphic? Heteromorphic ante there is morphological difference between the gametophyte and sporophyte. చూడగానే ఇది gametophyte, అది sporophyte అని చెప్పగలం. Homomorphic ante రెండు ఒకలానే ఉంటాయి, but one which shows the sex organs and undergoes sexual reproduction is a gametophyte, and the one which produces spores is a sporophyte. అలా differentiate చేస్తాం. అంటే after attaining the maturity and after reaching the reproductive stage, only we can differentiate the which one is gametophyte and which one is sporophyte in homomorphic alternation of generation type of plants. But in case of heteromorphic, both the sporophyte and gametophyte are not similar morphologically, and even physiologically also they are different. Morphologically we can differentiate which is which, what is what, that is which is a pteridophyte, which is a sporophyte, and which is a gametophyte. We can easily differentiate sporophyte from gametophyte. And genera like Selaginella, Salvinia, they produce two kinds of spores. The larger spores called the macrospores, and the small spores are called microspores. And this kind of production of two different spores is known as heterosporous. If the sporangia produce two types of spores, small spores are called microspores and the larger ones are called macrospores or megaspores. This kind of production of two different spores is known as heterosporous condition. మనం బ్రయోఫైటాలో హోమోస్పోరస్ చూసాం, ఎందుకంటే ప్రొడ్యూస్ అయిన స్పోర్స్ అన్నీ ఒకేలా ఉంటాయి, దట్ ఈస్ హోమోస్పోరస్. ఇక్కడ హెటరోస్పోరస్ చూస్తున్నాం. ద మెగాస్పోర్స్ అండ్ మైక్రోస్పోర్స్ దే జర్మినేట్ అండ్ గివ్ రైజ్ టు ఫీమేల్ అండ్ మేల్ గ్యామెటోఫైట్స్. మెగాస్పోర్స్ ఇక్కడ చూడండి స్పెసిఫిసిటీ ఉంది. హోమోస్పోరస్ అయితే అన్ని స్పోర్స్ ఒకేలా ఉంటాయి, గ్యామెటోఫైట్ని ప్రొడ్యూస్ చేస్తాయి. బట్ ఇన్ కేస్ ఆఫ్ హెటరోస్పోరస్ కండిషన్, the megaspores they germinate and give rise to the female gametophyte, and the microspores will give rise to male gametophytes. And the female gametophytes in this case they retain on the parent sporophytes for variable periods. The development of the zygote into young embryo take place within the female gametophyte. This event is precursor to the seed habit, considered an important step in evolution. అర్థమైందో లేదో, ఇక్కడ రెండు రకాల స్పోర్స్ ప్రొడ్యూస్ అవుతాయి. టెరిడోఫైట్స్, సమ్ టెరిడోఫైట్స్ yield two different types of spores, smaller spores and the larger spores. The small spores are called microspores. On germination, they give rise to male gametophyte. The macrospores, which are larger, they germinate and will produce the female gametophyte. Female gametophytes will have, after maturity, they will have the archegonia, the sex organs, female sex organs. Archegonia lopale reproduction, that is fertilization jarugutundi. ఫర్టిలైజేషన్ జరిగిన తర్వాత ఆర్కిగోనియం లోపల అంటే ఫీమేల్ గ్యామీట్ లోపలే ఎంబ్రియో డెవలప్ అవుతుంది. సో అలా డెవలప్ అవ్వడం అనేది ఫస్ట్ స్టెప్ ఇన్ ద ఇవల్యూషన్ టు ప్రొడ్యూస్ సీడ్. అంటే సీడ్ హ్యాబిట్ రావడానికి ఇక్కడ సీడ్ పడింది. టెరిడోఫైట్స్లో సీడ్ హ్యాబిట్, ఫ్యూచర్లో సీడ్ రావడానికి, ఇవి సీడ్స్ ప్రొడ్యూస్ చేయలేదు, బట్ దే హ్యావ్ ద స్టెప్, initial step for the production of seed. That is, they retain, the embryo retain in the gametophyte and give rise to the sporophyte. So this is about the class, my dear students. just you remember what are the main features and unique features and various examples of pteridophytes. Pteridophytes are the first land plants, first terrestrial vascular plants, also called vascular cryptogams. They have first time developed the vascular tissues, xylem and phloem. And they have developed for the first time true leaf stem and roots. The sporophyte is the dominant phase of the life cycle. Sometimes heterospores are produced. The leaves are called fronds and the leaves which bear sporangia are called sporophylls. And stellar evolution, origin and evolution of stele is seen for the first time in pteridophytes. And the xylem lack trachea or the vessels and the phloem lack companion cells. This is also a very important point. And regarding the reproduction, male and female gametophytes are there. They produce male and female sex organs. And the sporophytes, after undergoing the spore mother cells meiotic division, they give rise to the meiotic spores which are haploid and give rise to the germinate and give rise to the gametophytes, haploid gametophytes. The male gametophytes are the resultants of the germination of microspores and the female gametophytes are the resultants of the megaspores or the macrospores. In that way, male and female gametophytes are different, and male gametophytes, they produce male gametes, they swim in water and reach the female gamete, and fertilization happens in the female gametophyte. These are the important points. And sometimes the sporangia, the sporophylls that bear sporangia, they may aggregate into a cluster to form a cone-like structure called the strobilus. Best example for strobilus is equisetum. Equisetum, at its tip, it bears the strobilus or cone-like structure which bears the sporophylls. The sporophylls contain sporangia. The aggregate of sporangia are called sori. Single is sorus. Okay, this is about the class, and in the next session, we'll discuss about the classification of the Pteridophyta. Goodbye.